Welcome to our 10-minute table talk, everyone. I am Pastor Holman. Thank you very much for joining us here today. I want you to meet me over in Matthew chapter number 19, beginning at verse number 3. And this is what the scripture says. The Pharisees also came to him, testing him and saying, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason?" And he answered them, that being the Pharisees, and said, "Have you not read that he who made them in the beginning made them male and female? And said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." He finishes in verse number 6 by saying, "So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate." And just for a couple of moments, I want to talk to you about the merriness of marriage. The merriness of marriage. Here in Matthew chapter number 19, of course, there's a frequent interaction between Jesus and the Pharisees, and most of these interactions are a bit contentious. As the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the scribes, normally when they are interacting with Christ, they're trying to trip him up on the things of the law because they need something to disqualify him in the eyes of the people. In this particular verse in chapter number 19, they're trying to trip Jesus up about the law. And in that particular day, a man had a tremendous amount of freedom to do whatever he wanted to do in regards to his marriage. There was literally a certificate for divorce for every single instance in life. If a man came home and food was not on the table, he would file for a certificate of divorce. If his wife was doing something that she was not supposed to do, he would file for a certificate of divorce. Interestingly enough, only the man could file for a certificate of divorce and not the woman. The man could divorce the woman, but the woman could never divorce the man. And as the Pharisees are coming up to Jesus in Matthew 19, they're trying to trip him up on this law because this is a Jewish law, not a God law. I need you to hear that. This is a Jewish law, not a God law. While there are laws in the land that we have to acquiesce by, they're not necessarily God's law. And so Jesus is now interacting with these Pharisees who he knows is trying to trip him up. So he takes them all the way back, not to the law, but to the beginning. Not to the book of Moses, not to when Moses came down on Mount Sinai. He didn't take them there. He takes them all the way back to Genesis chapter number 2, before the fall of the man, and he brings into account the creation of God. And he says in verse number 4, "Have you not read that in the beginning," this supersedes the law. This supersedes anything that Moses may have written. This supersedes the 613 laws by which the Pharisees are now attesting to. He takes them back to the beginning when there was no law. He says, "Have you not heard that he that made them in the beginning made them male and female," talking about the social order of God. And he said, "For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife." That word join there means to cleave. The word cleave there means superglue. It means to be adhesive to the one in which God has given you, to leave your father and your mother and to be cleaved to your wife. And then he says this, "The two shall become one flesh." This is a very interesting interaction between Jesus and the Pharisees, because Jesus is making it known what true marriage is all about. I know we live in a day right now where people are redefining what marriage is. Two men, two women, all of these different things that people are now trying to redefine what the marriage institution is all about. But Jesus here in Matthew 19 affirms the plan of God, the preordained plan of God about what marriage was, about what marriage is, and what marriage shall always be. He said he made a male and female, and the two shall become one. And the man, the husband, must leave his father and his mother, leave what is behind, and cling to what God has given him, that being his wife. And then he says in verse number 6 to end it, he said, the two shall no longer be two, but one flesh. And he puts this at the end. Therefore, what God has joined together. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate. You got two different forces that are happening in marriage. And I believe, as I've said many times from this particular podium, that marriage is under an all-out attack in this world. Marriage is absolutely under attack. The traditional view of marriage, and I put that in air quotes very, very particularly, the traditional view of marriage, what people may say is traditional, but what I say is the God-instituted marriage is under all attack right now. And Jesus says this, the words are in red, if God has joined them together, meaning from the foundation of the world in Genesis chapter number 2 at verse number 30, if God has joined them together, then let no man and what man is trying to redefine separate them. So even though they got all of these laws that they've put on the books of why a man can divorce his wife, Jesus said this, God institutes marriage and man can't separate it. Right now, you're living in a time where 53% of the world marriages within the first 7 years end in divorce. That would be a number that would be astronomical if the number was not 51% in the church. But he says what God has joined together, what God has joined together, let not man and all of his clever devices separate. If God has joined us together, we should be one. We should be one. I will tell you as we end that marriage is a good thing. People mess up marriage. God's plan, God's ordained assignment has always been marriage between a natural born man and a natural born woman so that they too become one flesh. And by becoming one flesh, they express the glory of God. There is a marriedness to marriage. And I pray if you're watching that that man, that woman that you're married to helps you to be married. Matthew chapter number 19, verses 4 through 6 was our time today. Have a great day. We'll see you next week.